Excellent.
Hello, this is Greg Smalley on Pod 366 with my co-host this week, Robert Hubbard.
Hello?
And the first of our two guests, Veronika on the screen, who is the producer of the new film Sudbury Devil, and has chosen to join us to discuss the week's new releases before we start a second session where the director will join us and we will talk strictly about the Sudbury Devil. So hi, Veronika.
Hello. Hi, everybody from 366 Weird Movies podcast. I'm so happy to be here.
Where are you located?
Right now I'm currently in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But behind me actually is the home in which we stayed most of the time while shooting the Sudbury Devil. So I figured for our Massachusetts witchy times. But I work between Austin, Brooklyn, New Orleans, and Tulsa. I just got done playing triple bill last night in Tulsa with some of my bands, and I subbed in for this really weird new metal band. So that was fun and wild. So I'm recovering.
I think I saw New Orleans in your bio, so I always love New Orleans, but that didn't look like New Orleans behind you.
No, this is Massachusetts. Yeah.
Well, we have an interesting week of movies this week because there are two major releases that are coming into wide release this week that are both just super exciting for us at 366 Weird Movies. And I wasn't sure which one is actually the more exciting one. So let's see what I decided to go with. I decided to focus on Boy and the Heron first.
Yeah.
So this has been out. It was in New York and Los Angeles 2 weeks ago, and it's been out in IMAX in select theaters on December 1st, and now it is out in wide release so everyone can finally see it. We've been talking about it for months since it came in, and since it was first announced. It kind of was a late announcement. Miyazaki, Hayao, I cannot pronounce Japanese names, so I'm just going to say Miyazaki came out of retirement for a second time, and it was a big surprise to make this sort of semi-autobiographical movie about a young boy who loses his mother and journeys to a land between the living and dead to find her, guided by a heron who is maybe has questionable motives, perhaps. Don't know. I just dropped something. Sorry about that. So it's finally out for everyone. I just thought we'd see if you guys had any comments about this and see where the discussion takes us. So jump in if you have a comment.
Well, it's exciting. This is his first feature in 10 years, and I guess after announcing his retirement twice. I looked it up. Apparently, you said it was playing in New York earlier in IMAX. Apparently, they had openings in theaters for fans. I just looking. It's playing here about 30 miles away in Lawrence, and it looks like as though they're screening both the English the English dubbed version, and the Japanese language version with English subs. So you do have a choice. When you go see it.
I love that there's that choice. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well,
and
yeah.
Sorry, going. And actually, because I guess in addition with the Godzilla -1 opening, recently also in language and subtitled, in which is like one of the largest releases in foreign language for those who kind of claim that like you have to like dub everything, otherwise audiences won't come. So it's exciting. I don't know. It opens here tomorrow, so probably I'll check it out over the weekend and have more to say after that. But the
Yeah.
English dub cast looks very interesting. So the only other thing about it is that the title is from a Japanese novel from the late 30s, but the film story is completely original with Miyazaki. They just took the title from the novel for whatever reason.
Go ahead, Veronika.
Yeah, I saw Godzilla -1 in a packed house in Tulsa, Oklahoma recently. I did not
Nice.
expect it to be a packed house. I expected it to be me and maybe a couple other people with some anime shirts on or something. And I was really pleasantly surprised. It was like families, just about everybody, and you could tell it really hit. So I'm really excited that they are releasing. I didn't know that they were releasing it not just dubbed, but subbed as well. Yeah, and the trailer has blown me away. It seems to have some of the ferocity and energy of some of his movies, like Princess Mononoke, which is definitely one of my favorite Miyazaki works. And just yeah, it seems to be super personal. The Wind Rises, that's the only one of his I haven't seen yet. So, but I'll definitely be catching this one in theaters. I'm a sucker for anything with frogs. Like the John Boorman movie, The Emerald Forest, is one of my favorites because frogs win in that movie. And seeing the image of like the mud and the muck and the frogs telling him to forget himself or something, I don't know. I'm just all in. Yeah, and I love that there's a place for movies with Japanese subtitles and major releases now, and I hope that continues.
Have you by chance seen Blind Willow Sleeping Woman?
Yes,
There's a big frog component in that. So
I know. I love that proxy. Yeah, if there are frogs, I'm there basically. So
okay. Speaking of the English cast, it's Christian Bale, Dave Bautista, Gemma Chan, Willem Dafoe, who also is in our next movie, and Mark Hamill's in there, Robert Pattinson, Florence Pugh. So it's a big. I might actually go see the dubbed version by preference just for that cast.
understandably.
I usually prefer the original cast, but these Miyazaki always gets the top talent to come out for voice cast, so
Yeah,
it's good to see the English version. See them both, of course, would be ideal, but I don't know if we have time for that. So
yeah,
so everybody's excited about that one, which is good. Let's move
absolutely.
to the next title. This one is Poor Things. It has many different alternate posters. This is the one I chose. If you are just listening to this, you can't see, but it's Emma Stone on top of another sort of Emma Stone dressed the same. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very eye-catching. And there's some other posters feature her with bad makeup and so forth. So this is from an Alasdair Gray novel, an adaptation directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, and the plot basically is it's a Frankenstein type of thing where this woman is a corpse, but she has a fetus's brain implanted in her body and is brought back to life. I believe it's her own fetus's brain that's implanted in her body and brought back to life. And then she must learn how to adapt to society. So she comes in as a complete neophyte, and it's a way of satirizing sort of Victorian society by having it looked at through the eyes of a innocent newborn outsider, so forth. Of course, Emma Stone is getting a lot of talk for Best Actress for this. Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe are both getting talk about Best Supporting Actor. And looking at the trailer, I think the trailer tries to de-emphasize how weird it is and make it more like a just normal comedy that anybody can go see. But early reports are indeed that it does have that Yorgos Lanthimos touch to it, and we are certainly hoping it does. Okay, so I'll open up for thoughts from either of you if you want to jump in.
I'm excited. I've been a fan since seeing his Dogtooth
Yeah.
years ago, and the Lobster. I have not caught up The Favorite as of yet, but I've got weeks to do that. Yeah, I'm curious. I've only seen the TV spots, which seem to kind of emphasize from the look. It's kind of like maybe a little bit Tim Burtonish, or I guess, in how they're selling it, and kind of like, so I imagine they're downplaying the weirdness, or but I'm excited. I've been watching Emma Stone recently in the Showtime, The Curse, that we talked about
Yes.
a couple weeks ago, and like I said, I know it's based on a novel, so I'm interested where they go with this. The writer, he created, I guess he was co-writer on The Favorite, and I guess created the series on Catherine the Great, with Elle Fanning, which I haven't seen, but I've heard great things about it. So I'm kind of looking forward as to how this is going to turn out.
Okay, Veronika, any thoughts?
Yeah, this makes me think like that John C. Riley was like Tale of Tales movie or something, where it's like an adult dark fantasy, which I'm a fantasy nut. I scrape the bottom of the barrel at all times, and so to have something with prestige released within fantasy, and then I already loved his work from Dogtooth and The Lobster, but then I loved that The Favorite was like a really good like I saw that with my family, with my parents and everything. That was a good weird movie to see with everybody. And I love that he seemed to get a larger budget, to just play with more. So yeah, I'm excited to see whatever surreal touches he comes up with. I know Eduardo Uriena, the cinematographer for Sudbury Devil, and I talked about Dogtooth quite a bit whenever we were in film school together, but then a tiny bit before in some of the visual mechanics of Sudbury Devil. But yeah, Lorgos, Lanthimos is awesome. So I'm definitely pumped. Just looks super weird. Even if it doesn't fire on all cylinders, I think I'll just have a ball watching it. I'm super curious.
I think in weirdness, it'll probably be somewhere between The Favorite, which was most conventional, and
Right.
Lobster, which is definitely very, very absurdist. And
Yeah.
somewhere hopefully finds a sweet spot right there where it can, apparently, based on the reviews, apparently it is appealing to audiences and critics alike, which is great. So just out of curiosity, so both these are in theaters this week. Boy and the Heron and Poor Things. Which one would you guys see first if you're only going to see one movie? Which of the
Probably Poor Things first.
Yeah.
And then for me, for Heron, I think most theaters are kind of playing like alternate showtimes. You can see like the subtitled version earlier in the day and then the dub version later. So I know I'll be going to that one twice, like probably in the next week or so. But I'll probably hit Poor Things first.
Would you actually do the double feature of seeing Japanese and in the same day?
Maybe not same day. I would say earlier I would do back to back anymore. I kind of like to see one and then like have a chance to kind of savor it and then like go back to the other version just to see what my reactions are. Usually easier to do with anime, like when it's released on disc, because like most of the things you see like the English dubs first, and that's what you're familiar. But it's always kind of nice like on the Cowboy Bebop or things like that, to see like the Japanese, hear the Japanese version, and kind of get that get that flavor to it. It's nice to have it's actually nice to have the choice, in a larger theater rather than in your home, so for a change.
Absolutely. So I guess that was 2 votes for Poor Things, and I'll take Boy in the Heron first.
Yeah,
And
the more I think about it, yeah, it's a hard choice. It's a really hard choice. I was going to go to the cinema today to go see The Abyss, but then apparently they canceled the screening of the special edition one. It screened yesterday, and one theater had extended it one day, probably just hoping that it would get. But I guess not enough people bought tickets, so they scrapped it, I suppose. But that's the movie that made me want to make movies. I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I saw The Abyss. But so I was going to see that. But I think Poor Things, maybe because I consume anime at home most of the time, and that's my personal connection to it. So that, it has a very kind of personal feel. But it would be lovely to see, a Hayao Miyazaki movie. I saw Spirited Away in theaters, and that was incredible. That's the only one I've seen of his on a big screen.
I've never seen a Miyazaki on a big screen, so this will be my first.
You gotta. Yeah, and it looks sweeping and marvelous. Yeah.
Okay, great. So those are the 2 big releases. Now we got 2 much smaller releases. This one, in fact, is very, very small indeed and specialized. So what we're looking at here is a still of, I guess you guys know who that is, right?
Yes.
He looks, I don't know, looks vaguely familiar.
Quit your moody brooding.
So this is called, it's called Werner Herzog Radical Dreamer, and it's a documentary that looks sort of, mostly to be by the numbers, talking head overview of his career, which is great. It's certainly well deserved, certainly an interesting topic. Great for people who I would say it's probably best for people who have like a partial acquaintance with Herzog, know a few of his films, and then want to get filled in on what some of the others are, which is most of us, I doubt. He has a huge catalog, and I doubt everybody's seen everything he's made. But it doesn't look like, it looks to me like something you can easily, don't have to search at theaters. It will be on video on demand right away, and probably the price will go down in coming weeks. So I think you're safe to wait on that if you're interested in seeing the Werner Herzog documentary. Lots of people, I know Patti Smith was one of the people that's talking about him. Let's see, who else did I see in the trailer? Robert Pattinson talked about him. A lot of people were speculating on whether he really ate his shoe or whether he faked it. I think he really ate it, but
I've always been he ate it, I can't, and that was like a foundational memory for me, like 12, 13 years old, watching Aguirre, The Wrath of God, and then watching him eat his shoe, and then being introduced to Errol Morris in the same day. That was just like a magical day. So he ate his shoe, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. I had this, who else? I think Nicole Kidman is also
Wim Wender, Wim Wenders,
Christian Bale, Carl Weathers, and the director Volker Schlondorf. From what I've seen, it's kind of mixed. So the reviews are kind of mixed about it, but I mean, anything featuring Herzog is interesting just because he is interesting. I think that this one just sort of like, I guess, more concentrates on like the latter part of his career. Like I don't believe it's as comprehensive going all the way back to like even when Even Dwarfs Started Small or any of that work. But like I said, it's Herzog, so it's going to be interesting no matter what, I think. So
all right. So
I'm kind of curious to see if they'll mention I guess what is it? He rescued Joaquin Phoenix from a wreck and then got shot and then was shot out at the highway and survived. So it's like,
Just a discussion question to throw out quick.
Yeah.
It might be easy. I think to me, Herzog's a guy who has one masterpiece, a lot of great movies, and then a lot of movies that are just interesting because Werner Herzog made them. A lot of his documentaries, if anybody made them would, and you didn't have his voiceover, would not be as interesting as they are. But give us what do you think is Herzog's best movie, and then maybe a movie that is not his best, but it's kind of you have a soft spot for as a personal favorite?
I'll go first. My favorite remake of all time is his Nosferatu, and that's my favorite. There are probably more I'm not a masterpiece. I'm not an objective masterpiece kind of person. I'm a really subjective person, and that's probably like a high up pick for me, because honestly, Wild Blue Yonder is one of my favorite movies of all time, with Brad Dourif just like looking directly into camera and being weird as hell. It just feels like pure Herzog. In the reusing documentary footage, which I love Roger Corman, so I love reusing footage and repurposing footage for things. And so I would say, Aguirre would be like the masterpiece, and I've seen that the most. I think Invincible is worth checking out with Tim Roth. It's not the weirdest of his movies. It's kind of one of his more classical Hollywood things, but it's really beautiful, really underrated. And then Wild Blue Yonder. Those would be my underrated picks. But Nosferatu is with the Popol Vuh score. I just go back to that one. My Anchor Bay widescreen clamshell VHS of is just always on heavy rotation.
Okay. Robert.
Masterpiece. I would say Aguirre. Although, like, you could also make a case for Fitzcarraldo as well, I think. So between those two, my other one is not a masterpiece, but it's favorite. His Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans.
Woo!
Just because when it was announced, I had my doubts being a fan of the original Bad Lieutenant, and just kind of thinking, but it's its own thing, and even as strange, if not stranger than Ferrara's Bad Lieutenant. I'm a Nick Cage fan, so the whole bit with the whole thing, his soul is still dancing. It's kind of like that's his favorite. Probably not. I don't know if you call it one of his best films, but it's certainly a favorite. Also, Wild Blue Yonder. With Europe. I have to go. I have not seen Nosferatu yet, for whatever reason. I probably will put that up like soon. What was the and the other thing was my son, what have I done? Which is kind of Herzog, kind of trying to do David Lynch, and it's interesting. I can't say that it's good, but it's definitely interesting. So what would you, Greg? What do you consider his masterpiece?
Well, Robert, there's a reason that you write for our site, because you just duplicated my choices, which is Aguirre for the masterpiece, and Bad Lieutenant for the very good film. That's not. It's an excellent film, so it's not a guilty pleasure.
No, it's great.
It's just such a strange idea to remake somebody else's film in a completely, the original Bad Lieutenant is a great movie, but so bleak, so Catholic, so unsurprising. And so he makes a remake with, the same general plot outline, but it's just wacky gonzo black comedy instead.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was an audacious choice. He pulled it off. Nick Cage is great and terrible at the same time, which is how we love him best. Yeah, so those are my choices. Sort of an honorable mention, a movie I found kind of a little dull throughout was Strozek up until the end, when he ends it on this image of this dancing chicken that is just mesmerizing and perfect. It just perfectly incorporates the absurdity of how Herzog sees the world. And he famously kind of hates chickens and sees them as a symbol of stupidity. So, so that's that. Yeah. So that one's something you can probably check out on VOD if you're a big Herzog fan. And let's just talk about the last Blu-ray release, which I don't know how much we will have to say about. And he's getting bigger and bigger. Blackula.
Flying at the screen.
It is Blackula. Blackula on Blu-ray. Now, this Blu-ray release is from a company called Sandpiper. I don't know anything about them. Shout Factory had released a DVD with a lot of extra features. I don't know if there's anything on this Blackula Blu-ray. Apparently, they don't have the rights anymore because somebody else is releasing it. It has not been released on Blu-ray before, so there's that. The cover very vintage. I'll go on.
Okay. No, this, from what I've seen, this release is just bare bones. There's no extras. Shout Factory, like a few years ago, did do a double feature Blu-ray of Blackula and the sequel Scream Blackula Scream, that had a commentary from a film historian, but that's out of print. And I guess if you find it, you're gonna pay the nose. The only other release I can find is a Region B from Eureka. That's also a double feature with both films, but has introductions from Ken Newman on both, and I think that's available, but only if you can do all region. That's worth searching out if you're into it. But no, it's a good. I think it's a good thing that Blackula should be available to whomever at whatever time. They just did, like, the local library did a program showing it, and I have to say I've liked the film, but it's much better. Both films, they're much better than you would think. Than you would think in terms of exploitation or even horror. And William Marshall is great. He is Blackula. No matter what you see him in anymore, it's just sort of like, yeah.
We didn't describe the plot, so if you haven't seen it, it's pretty much the first. It's not technically the first black horror film. I'm sure there have been black.
I think that's Black, and I think technically the first might be Blackenstein.
But I was thinking there was in the 30s or so forth that were just obscure. But it's Dracula as a African prince, and it's a sort of goofy B movie set in the 70s with that kind of blaxploitation aesthetic. And yet what they have in there is this fantastic performance from William Marshall as the African prince turned vampire, who was a Shakespearean trained actor and had done Othello a lot, and is just so much better than anybody else in the cast, and just commands the screen every time he's on there. So that's Blackula. It's worth looking at. Veronika, have you seen Blackula, and do you have thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've and Scream, Blackula Scream as well. Dig both of them a lot. I watched them in like the 14-year-old me, so I was just kind of powering through. But what I remember most is his Shakespearean trained performance and the power of that performance, and the power of putting really well-trained actors into lower budget movies, and how that always is a winning, comment, like Vincent Price and, just any of the great horror actors. And I think this performance stands among those. It's just like, he just jumps out of the screen totally. I'm not collecting as many Blu-rays right now, but I know my friend Danny and Monty, who I'm going to be visiting in North Carolina, we're going to be just like powering through a bunch of movies, and I bet he's picking this one up. So yeah.
Okay, great. One thing I will mention, you got to if you're watching it for the first time, you're going to have to adjust your sensibilities to the time period, because there is a lot of sort of stereotypical behavior, and particularly I think gays get stereotyped in this film in a way that probably wouldn't play today very well.
And certain language and terms, like words that we don't use anymore, but were very prevalent even in entertainment. That was kind of like interesting, watching the audience when it came to those, and just sort of like getting them being very uncomfortable about it. It's kind of like, it's the time. It's the time.
It's powerful, because then you can have those conversations with people about it, and see how it makes people squirm now, and sometimes it gives you hope for the future. Yeah.
It was all intended pretty innocently.
Yeah.
I think you always have to look at context and say, oh, no, there's this bad word, but you have to think of it in the context of the time, and interpret how the author intended it.
And actually, when you look at it, it's actually, for the time, it's like one of the few adaptations that actually is pretty close to the Stoker novel, just in terms of subtext and such. Recently, there is a graphic novel sequel that has been written called Blackula: The Return of the King, done by Rodney Barnes, who is a writer who did the Philadelphia comic series and was a writer on the Boondocks show years ago, where he sort of resurrects the character in the current time. That's very much worth a look. It's easy to find if you enjoy Blackula or Scream Blackula Scream.
That sounds awesome.
It's worth getting the book, and I suspect that at some point it may turn into being adapted for television or screen. Although, since William Marshall is gone, I don't have any idea who could even do the character as well as he did. He just made, no matter how bad the film was, if he was in it, he just elevated it immensely. I tracked down a copy of Abby, which is the Exorcist ripoff.
Yes, Abby. Oh my gosh, I have not
fun.
seen Abby. Yeah,
it's fun, but it's nowhere near this. But he's great. He's great in it. So
cool. All right. Well, let's see. There is one more movie to discuss, but we don't have any time, so we're just going to skip over that one.
Yeah.
So we are actually
boring.
We're actually going to come back after a break and discuss that one. Before we go, we do have a little bit of time left, and we have a question that we'd like to ask guests at the end. And since we have two guests, maybe we'll get them separate. But our surprise question that we always ask is, Veronika, what is your hometown, and can you recommend a restaurant for us there?
Well, I was born in Springfield, Missouri, but I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma primarily. And since I'm in Tulsa and thinking a little bit more about food right now, I would say go to the Nam Hai Oriental Market. That also within it, there's a place called Pho Ni. And they have wonderful banh mi, super simple, but just like so delicious, really delicious vegan and vegetarian, as well as meat eating pho. And then their the summer rolls are absolutely delicious. And it also feels like it is trapped in a time ambiguous state between 1989 and 1997. And so just walking inside this little mall, and there's always this sweet yappy dog and a bunch of people playing ping pong. And you can go get a nice drink and stuff too from the market. Yeah, it's delicious, great peanut sauce, and super inexpensive. I'm a cheap date, and nothing better than pho knee in Tulsa. Yeah, and if you're there, Eaton Square Cinemas still has original skee ball and $4 matinees, of first run movies, and $6.50. So I see all my Marvel movies. It's not, their projection. It's the only family run theater still in town, and God bless it. Yeah.
We used to have one second run theater like that in Louisville, and it closed down, unfortunately, about a year ago. And I saw movies there. Yeah.
And this is a first run, because Tulsa used to have about 5 second run theaters, but this is still a first run. Yeah, which is awesome. I'll go see a Marvel movie for $4. That's kind of the only way you can get me to see a Kate movie these days. So.
All right. Well, you know what? We are running out of time, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back when the director, Andrew, I'm going to say Rakich?
Yes.
Rakich?
Rakich.
I didn't get to ask him how to pronounce it, so well, join us to discuss the Sudbury Devil, and we will spend about a half an hour on that. So we're going to sign off for right now. We'll be back in no time for you, and see you then.
The Witchfinder General.
Hi, we're back, and Veronika is back with us. Robert is back with us, and we are also joined by Andrew Rakich, the director of the Sudbury Devil. Veronika is the producer, of course, and worked on it. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Robert. What's going on? Thanks for having me.
And so we're going to talk about the Sudbury Devil, which I did get a chance to see. Before I even we start talking about it, what's the availability of the movie to the general public at this moment?
At this moment, it is undergoing an independently organized roadshow in 3 countries, the US, UK, and Australia. We've been on, I think, something like 25 screens so far, and hopefully more to come. However, sort of the big news and kind of probably the most relevant thing to anyone listening is that on December 21st, the winter solstice, we are doing a self-distributed streaming release, not physical, streaming release, basically through my website, atunshavefilms.com. And, we can have all relevant links in the description of this podcast, or you can head over to my YouTube channel, atunshavefilms.com, or just search the Sudbury Devil, and the link will absolutely come up.
Okay.
But yeah, December 21st, it'll be available worldwide.
Just in time for Christmas.
And where is it?
Indeed.
Where is it playing next on screen?
That's a great question. I don't think we have any screenings lined up in the short term, but I know that Stray Cat it wants to screen it again, and a couple of other theaters expressed interest as well. So we're just kind of waiting to hear on them. So hopefully we'll continue to be able to have kind of one night only or limited run screenings in all sorts of cool, funky theaters, all over the world.
Stray Cat is in Kansas City?
Kansas
Yes,
City.
that's right. Yeah.
Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City?
Missouri, on the Missouri side. So.
Okay.
Yes, Missouri.
So Sudbury Devil is a folk horror, I think we can safely say. It is set in the 1700s? 1700s.
1600s.
Right? So early Puritans encountering the devil and various glowing lights, and their own sort of conflicted history of bloodshed, I think. Is there any other way you as director would like to describe or pitch the movie to people to try to get them interested in it? What's the twist on it?
Well, basically, it's about these two witch hunters that go to a small Massachusetts town of Sudbury, which is incorporated the town of Wayland, modern day town of Wayland, Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. It's always been a creepy town, Puritan times and modern times, no exception. And basically, these two witch hunters have heard that this guy saw some really freaky stuff in the woods, and they force this guy to lead them to the site of where he saw said freaky stuff, and it all kind of goes downhill from there. It is a film that is very concerned with the foundational rot of America. And it's essentially about this conflict between the quote unquote godly sort of Western civilization that is beginning to colonize the North American continent at this time, and as the Puritans conceived of it, sort of the demonic, satanic wilderness, and all of the superstition and the paganism and the witchcraft and the femininity and the sexuality that goes along with that in term mythologically and otherwise. This film is the sort of primary event of this film is a conflict called King Philip's War. Our film is set in 1678, 2 years after this conflict ended. A little known but shockingly brutal and also vital American conflict between the United Colonies of New England and three Native American nations of that region, which basically, I mean, it was only lasted 18 months in southern New England, but it led to a shocking number of civilian deaths. It's the bloodiest war per capita in American history, and ended with the genocide of those Native American nations. Not exactly the happy-go-lucky story of the first Thanksgiving, right? There's kind of a bit of a reason why we as a country in our kind of self-congratulatory nationalist mythology don't like to remember these events, because they're just deeply unflattering to everybody involved, not kid-friendly whatsoever. And so a big part of this film is essentially these Puritan men who are veterans of King Philip's War. Everybody is touched by it in some way. Every character is crippled, from some war wound in some manner. And it's all about these. We use sort of the allegorical conceits of folk horror to kind of expose this truth about early American history. And in putting our characters in these wonderfully bizarre, violent, and depraved situations, we kind of strip away their artifice and reveal the brutality, the hypocrisy, the authoritarianism, and just the frail, whimpering humanity beneath.
Oh, excellent pitch. Excellent pitch. I did, before I turn the questioning over to Robert, that leads to a lot of follow-up questions, but there's something that caught my eye that I wanted to ask about or have you mention, and that is, can you tell us where the film premiered and why or how that came about?
Sure. So our film premiered at the Satanic Temple World Headquarters in Salem, Massachusetts. Basically, I have a friend who is a minister of Satan, and I had filmed there once before in the headquarters for my YouTube channel. And when it came around to deciding where we were going to premiere this film, we could think of no finer place. The Satanic Temple is of course, highly. Not only is it just aesthetically the perfect venue for our premiere, but I think spiritually, ideologically as well, because a big thing of what the Satanic Temple in particular does is kind of stand up against this sort of heterodox, Christian sort of theocracy and Christian conservatism. So it seemed like kind of the perfect place. And what a raucous premiere. It was a great 2-night premiere that we were at in Salem. Whole cast and crew turned out. It was thrilling. It was awesome.
Okay. All right. Hey, so Robert, do you have some questions prepared or just off the top of your head that you can ask?
Oh, a little bit. I think as I told Veronica after the screening at Stray Cat, um, I had I'd heard the title of the film, but went in not knowing anything aside that it was full horror. And I think afterwards told Veronica it's sort of like um, the hell. I guess it'd be like the hellspawn of a field in England, and Ravenous after just a really raucous night together. And it goes further than either, and it actually goes further than either of those films. Uh, it's very layered, and I just have to say, I was just like really impressed, especially for so we're doing low budget folk horror film. You didn't fall into any of the traps that you would that one would expect. Um, yeah, I guess in terms of the questions, like I went through your YouTube channel, which I recommend anyone who sees a film and is a fan, they should check it out to see some of your other work. And I did like, I guess on one of the pieces that you did on some of the historical basis, so getting more of an understanding of what was in the film. I guess mine is, before I get to like initial questions about the film, there was one question I meant to ask Veronica and just put it off because I wanted to investigate all on my own. But at the end, you have an executive producer credit by one Tabitha King. And I was just thinking, could it be that Tabitha King? And I guess it is the esteemed writer and wife of Stephen King. How did she, I guess, become executive producer, lending her name to the film?
Do you want me to field that, Veronica?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Tabitha is an excellent genealogist, and one of her big interests is the 17th century New England. And she found me through my YouTube channel, and during our crowdfunding campaign, even though she found me a little bit after. Our crowdfunding campaign, we had a perk basically that was, if you donate a certain amount of money to the budget, you get a producer credit, and Tabitha, out of just I guess being a fan of mine and sort of wanting to see kind of what sort of movie I would make, was incredibly generous and footed some of our budget for us, yeah, so we have some other wonderful sort of people too who also sort of were bigger donors, like Alexander Rosenblum, who's also listed as a co-producer. So yeah, so we were very fortunate. I mean, Tabitha really sort of we ate well because of Tabitha, and I was able to hire drivers and didn't have to drive to Logan Airport at 3:00 in the morning to pick people up because of Tabitha. So we love her. She's great, patroness of all things 17th century New England, and yeah, she's awesome.
Okay. I remember seeing that on the screen, and I was just thinking, could it be that Tabitha King? And just said wonderful. As to the other, having seen some of your other work on the YouTube channel, Sudbury Devil, I guess the evolution of it, because most of the other work is, I guess, more lighter or more comedy oriented. So there's more comedy in it. There's comedy in Sudbury Devil, but it's more like very dark humor. This really succeeds as a dramatic piece, as a horror film. Did you find like in terms of making that jump from some of your earlier work into doing this, like I guess stretching, I guess in terms of like stretching yourself?
No, honestly, I've always been interested in horror. A lot of my other films, like my shorts and stuff, and and student films and stuff were horror films. And I didn't really find it to be very much of a jump at all, because I do think that horror and comedy are very sort of closely linked and very closely related. I think horror is comedy's sort of evil twin sister, because both are sort of concerned with wrenching an emotional reaction, an involuntary emotional reaction out of an audience. It's very concerned with affect. Uh, so I think, and so yeah, I think they're sort of they're sort of logical bedfellows. So I think that horror and comedy can are sort of pretty interchangeable. If you're good at one, you're probably going to be good at the other. And also I think in terms of kind of the message of our film, in terms of the allegory, I think horror operates a lot like satire in that way, where you can kind of indirectly speak a harsh truth. You know what I mean? You can play in the margins. You can say the unspoken thing in horror and in comedy and satire that in a more sort of straightforward dramatic piece, and especially in something like a nonfiction piece, it would come across as very preachy, very corny. But by kind of showing instead of telling through horror or satire, and they're both just uniquely equipped, I think, to do that, you can kind of plant a very strong idea into an audience's brain. So yeah, no, I didn't find that difficult at all.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's very layered, because you deal with well, there's a lot of things. There's the no that in terms of like the founding the country, and dealing with the native population. You have religion. You have religion and hypocrisy. You also dealing with race, and also with the role of women. There's so much. There's so much that's going on, and for like most, in terms of like the and I would say and sect. Although with like some of the folk horror that I've seen that gets classed with folk horror, when it's touched on, it's not really touched on deeply. The only things I can think of is things like Blood on Satan's Claw, where it's sort of oblique, and Ravenous, where you have the homoeroticism as a part of it. Sudbury, it's kind of you handle it very well. It's very upfront. I don't know if this is giving it anything away to people who haven't seen it, but the double penetration at the end,
Yeah.
figuratively and literally, it was just kind of, but I don't know, in
Yeah,
terms of like
it's delightful. It's just lovely.
when you conceive, like in terms of like when you conceive this, like how long, I guess how long was the production in terms of conceiving the project, and how you're gonna just approach so much, like so I know I'm assuming that you were in probably like several years in terms of like getting when things kind of like coalesced and gelled together.
Well, before I answer that, I mean, honestly, as our resident film scholar, Veronika, do you want to talk about kind of the folk horror elements and Blood on Satan's Claw and some of the influences from Ravenous and stuff?
Yeah, well, definitely. Blood on Satan's Claw. Also, they screened the trailer of it before at Stray Cat Film Center, and the Hammer film, The Witches, which is like maybe my favorite Hammer film, which is a classic Veronika hot take. But I'm amongst people who love Wild Blue Yonder by Werner Herzog, so I'm safe. But I will say I met Andy whenever he sat behind me in Leanna Lawrence's class, Foundations of Western Thought. And he was the only other person on the planet Earth that I'd heard utter the words ravenous out loud in a context of the movie. And so, yeah, we became great, fast friends from there. But yeah, whenever I I was approached to do. I was really hungry for folk horror, but yeah, I do feel like you touching on stuff like Blood and Satan's Claw and Ravenous, it really does get to just the absolute most grunty meat and potatoes kind of like exactly what I want in it. So yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
I was
Blood,
gonna,
yeah.
I'm sorry. The only other film I can think of that deals specifically with the Americas in that is
Yes.
probably Eyes of Fire.
Yeah, Eyes of Fire is great.
Finally put it last year.
Yes.
Everything else is pretty much like it's like British and such. So
Yeah, it's
this,
Europe, yeah, especially Britain.
Yeah, and it is that. Yeah, and we definitely really wanted to plant our American flag. Down our version of whatever screwed up flag that our company would have. The Sudbury flag. And
yeah,
I guess our flag is a rock. That's instead. So.
Yeah, Eyes of Fire is a great movie. It's the special effects are just, even for 1982, are just absolutely awful. But it does kind of add to the charm a little bit. But no, that is a great movie, and it does. You're right, it does sort of deal with that. And I think the unique thing about American folk horror is, especially and specifically in terms of the colonial era and in terms of westward expansion, and Ravenous kind of touches on this a little bit as well, but and this is highly relevant to the Puritan cosmology and demonology. Is this again, like I kind of said in the pitch, it's this conflict between settlement and wilderness, right? Between farm and forest, between light and darkness, between God and the devil. And here's where I'll sort of fly my my ALF freak flag a little bit. But in the days of westward expansion and in the days of Manifest Destiny, the colonists rarely appreciated the natural beauty of their environment, even though pre-industrial North America must have been absolutely staggeringly beautiful. Instead, they fixated on its resource potential. They wanted to cordon everything off. They wanted to fence everything off. They brought animal farming to this continent, creating very strict hierarchies in that way. The farmer is kind of the lord of the manor. His animals are his serfs. His wife and children are his stewards. So there's this very ordered, very property based, very sort of meticulously laid out in terms of land management and cordoned off in terms of ownership sort of view of nature and this sort of trampling over of nature. Of course, but what they didn't realize at the time was that Native Americans also had very intricate forms of land management. They were just unrecognizable to European eyes. But from the European perspective, Native Americans were these primitive Stone Age people who lived at one with nature, and while certainly sort of 20th and 21st century liberal sort of perspectives might view that as like a good thing, even though that's itself ahistorical. Of course, back in the 17th and 18th century, that was something sort of deeply evil. You know what I mean? It was something deeply perverse to be sort of that aboriginal. And so I think Eyes of Fire really touches on it, because it's they go into this valley, and it's this sort of untamed, unreached valley that no European has ever seen. Of course, they have sort of weird, freaky, naked demon people and wood witches and stuff. But that is kind of how Europeans at the time viewed indigenous people of the Eastern Woodlands. So it's even though it is itself this sort of horror movie nonsense, it's very much based on a real psychological sort of state of mind, I guess. And and Sudbury is also very, very concerned with that. I mean, we are, the native presence in the film is almost this sort of ghostly presence. And even though it isn't strictly historically accurate that every Native American in New England was completely wiped out, we kind of wanted to suggest that almost, right? We wanted our characters to enter this kind of newly depopulated forest that is kind of just a ghost town. It's sort of this graveyard, and it's empty. There's nobody there except for this sort of, Josiah Cutting, played by Josh Hope in the film, says, the savages are gone, the devil remains. And that's very much something that the characters are contending with, in sort of this, they've just depopulated these forests and this wilderness, and now they need to colonize it. But in our story, of course, and I think in all good American folk horror of this period, the wilderness strikes back. The wilderness is not going to go down without a fight. And in those sort of margins, like you were saying, Robert, we can deal with sort of formational ideas about race and gender in American life, and sexuality, and that kind of, within that milieu of we're sort of able to sort of formulate almost this creation myth, this sort of dark creation myth about America. So yeah, that's definitely what we were trying to do.
And touching a little bit more on Eyes of Fire, and kind of relating it to our movie and to Blackula, which we spoke about the Blu-ray release a little bit before you were on, Andy, is that we talked about the power of putting Shakespearean trained actors into low budget movies. And I think what would set our movie apart, or what would continue the legacy of Eyes of Fire in a positive direction, would be casting conservatory and Shakespearean trained actors in our movie. And then speaking to the sort of dramatic elements, of the film and how it works so well, I think, is largely in part, due to all of the incredibly well-trained actors.
Yeah, all the actor performances were impressive, and I guess I should mention this because in terms of period, this is in terms of the dialogue, you actually it was written in sort of like period appropriate, so that everyone is sort of speaking the cadence and vocabulary of the time, and so in most historical films, they may make an attempt at it, but then they just sort of like give it up. And everyone did very well with this, and especially, and it kind of like, I guess in my mind, where it's low budget and you look at historical stuff and you start kind of like trying to pick it apart. But then as it progressed, it's sort of like you don't really care that much. It was sort of like, I believe that they were actually a part of the period, which like on much larger budgeted films, you don't even kind of get that far into buying that belief. And especially Kendra Unique's performance, which is pretty brave.
Yeah.
In areas, because in terms of like how it's set up, with Cutting's reaction to like the native population and such, that doesn't really believe that they are human. And her character, at first you meet her, sort of plays into that at first, until sort of like as these go along, you reveal that there's more. I get that there's more intent behind it. Like I say, it was an amazing performance. And I think, as Veronika had mentioned, somebody had asked if there's any time when people walked out of the theater, and I believe that she mentioned that was kind of like the point where some couldn't take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, to your first point about the dialect and the accent, you're right. There's very few films that really kind of nail the early modern English language. Most don't attempt to, because in order to be commercial, I mean, a lot of it is indecipherable. So in terms of commercial potential, I could see, sort of, if I put my producer cap on, how something, it's just like, let's not do that, but at the same time, a lot, there is also, but we have seen and heard this language before in Shakespeare films, certainly, there are even in something like Shakespeare in Love, which is kind of more modern, but definitely sort of, Tom Stoppard, who wrote that, even though a conscious effort was made to make it accessible, like there's all sorts of period accurate dialogue just sort of peppered in there. Within our genre, the Robert Eggers' The Witch really nailed the dialogue as well. A lot of that, as I understand, was taken right from literature of the time, as was a lot of ours. But our film is the first film ever made to feature a period correct accent. So the accent that we use in this film is called original pronunciation. It was reconstructed by a linguist and a Shakespeare scholar to basically approximate, it's probably not exact, but it's a good approximation, probably the best guess we have currently as far as how, Shakespeare sounded, how King James I sounded, how basically the accent in Southern England in the early 17th century. Now, that isn't precisely our time. We're 1678, but there was a bit of a fad a few years ago of having Shakespeare plays performed in this accent. So the good news is there's a lot of resources out there for actors. So basically, and one of our dialogue coaches, Emma Coulter, was pretty proficient in it as well. So that really was kind of a no-brainer. I thought like, wow, wouldn't that be amazing to not only have period appropriate dialogue, but an accent to go along with that is accurate. And actually, speaking of Kendra's performance as well, that was sort of the bit of artistic license that we took because, unfortunately, but also, predictably, the Europeans, English people at the time, left us a lot of clues as to how they spoke, but their slaves, they didn't really care about. They didn't leave behind much information about them at all. So basically, as far as Kendra's accent went, that was kind of a big question mark. And so Kendra and Emma Coulter, our dialect coach, basically pieced Frankenstein and accent together from Barbadian, Jamaican, and original pronunciation, and also Congolese sort of sounds, and sort of Frankenstein it together. And I think it works beautifully. But yeah, her performance is incredible. And Flora is just so extra. I love her. She's great.
Okay. I'm not sure how much time we have left. I did want to mention this because, especially after watching the film, I went to the page to see some of your other work, and went through the other thing that you're mainly known for, Checkmate Lincoln Nights, which I have to say, I was pretty impressed. I didn't in terms of presenting the historical fact and being entertaining as well. I think it was really pulled off well, and sort of like this, where like also in Sudbury Devil, where you can make sort of parallels to certain things going on in the country. I was in Lincoln Nights when there's a certain parallel made, I think, with other works, which was kind of like at first, where did Nazis come in? But it's completely consistent in terms of history and kind of like where we're heading now. And again, it's like most of the earlier work, like I say, it's comedy, but it's not. But it's what's the word? It's comedy. It's like, but it's not like frivolous. But it's not frivolous, I think is the term I'm looking for. Sudbury Devil, again, is straight horror, but again, it's not frivolous as well. I hope that it's going to find a larger audience for you.
Oh, thanks, Robert. That's very kind. Thanks.
Okay. God, the only other thing is like in terms of like also with the historical thing, the character Witchfinder General series that that you do, which also plays into this, and some of the history on King Philip, which I'm guessing from some of the research that went into this.
Yeah, totally.
So, I don't have a quiz. I don't have a question.
That's fine.
In terms of which one, yeah, I do have a question, Greg. Something to add, Greg.
Not really a question, but it's something to add, and maybe it's a little bit of a question. We are running low on time, but it seems to me that if you go to the, we'll link it, but is it pronounced Atanshe?
Atunche, yeah.
The YouTube page, you will find a lot of little historical documentary type little films that are going to give you some background, play into the Sudbury Devil, inform it, and make it a richer experience. Would you say that's correct, Andrew?
Yeah, oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay. And just so we are running out of time, but I was curious. There's so much history. Are you a historian by background who went into filmmaking, or is history a hobby sideline?
Yeah, no, other way around. I'm a filmmaker by trade, and I consider by profession. I think I'm not a historian. I would never claim to be a historian. But I'm a documentarian, right? But who's kind of reasonably good at research and can kind of tell a good source from a bad one, I guess. And I always I cite my work. You know what I mean? I'm very upfront about the fact that I'm a filmmaker and a documentarian and an entertainer. So I basically lean on I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, on the academics and the experts who have been studying this stuff for their entire lives, and I cite their work extensively, down to the page number. I don't expect anybody to believe me. They can check my sources and come to their own conclusion about whether I've done a good job kind of presenting the narrative of the history that I'm telling.
All right, excellent. Well, we do have, speaking of, we spoke about frivolous, we do have a frivolous final question that we always ask. We've already asked Veronika, so we're going to ask you. And that question that we try to end every interview with a new interviewee is, what is your hometown, which I think we know, and more importantly, can you recommend a restaurant there?
Yeah, Wayland, Massachusetts, and no.
Is there no seafood? It's you must be inland.
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't eat meat, so
Oh.
But there's yeah, I mean, there's good places in yeah, I mean, Boston does have some good food for sure. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I live in New Orleans now, so it's like, so I have very high standards for food these days. If it's not like excellent and mouthwatering, then I just yeah. I'm a snob about food now. Ever since I moved to South Louisiana.
It's okay, Natalie and I'll cook for you.
I have one quick off-topic question. Well, take the chance. Since you're a historian, what was your opinion of the film Revolution, the Hugh Hudson?
I haven't seen that in ages, so I don't even really remember it. I remember enjoying it for the most part, but a lot of inaccuracies too. But not that's that's like a be all end all. But I do remember there are quite a few inaccuracies.
And okay, well, we have 30 seconds for an outro. So thank you, Andrew Rakich. Thank you, Veronika Payton.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
And Sudbury Devil will be December 21st. Look for
it. It'll be streaming worldwide.
We'll link
on atunshefilms.com.
We'll link to everything for you. So thanks so much for coming on. Great success with the film, and see you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, great talking to you guys.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure.